In a world where optimism and the pursuit of meaning often define the trajectories of human existence, what happens when we choose to confront the starkest and most unsettling truths about life? What if we embrace the possibility that life might not have any inherent meaning, and that suffering is an unshakable part of the human condition? Can we still move forward, find purpose, and live creatively, even when faced with such despair? These are the central questions explored in my book, The Art of Living a Meaningless Existence. In it, I examine how some of the most pessimistic philosophers and thinkers in history have not only confronted the darkness of existence but have also forged paths through it, offering us profound insights on how to thrive in a world that often seems devoid of purpose. To begin, we must ask, is it even possible to be a true pessimist in the absolute philosophical sense? Can we look at existence in its entirety and truly believe that life is fundamentally negative, that non-being is preferable to being, and yet still choose to continue living? This is the paradox at the heart of philosophical pessimism. If existence is so terrible, why bother existing at all? Is it possible to believe that suffering, meaninglessness, and absurdity define life, and yet still continue to engage with it, whether through philosophy, art, or simply the act of living? While many philosophers have explored these questions, few have embraced the full implications of such a bleak worldview as Philip Mainländer, a relatively obscure figure whose philosophical system offers some of the darkest insights into existence that have ever been proposed. Mander's life and work are a perfect lens through which to explore this paradox. His radical approach to pessimism, and the ultimate choice he made to end his own life at the age of 34, challenge us to confront the limits of philosophy and the real-life consequences of intellectual despair. Philip Mainländer, born in 1841 in Germany under the name Philip Botz, was the youngest of 6 siblings in a wealthy family. His father, a successful businessman, imposed strict expectations on him, steering Mander toward a life in trade and banking. Despite the material wealth his family provided, Mander found little solace in this world. As a young man, he was thrust into a career that seemed to hold no deeper meaning or fulfillment. His life felt like a monotonous, grinding routine, an existence driven by the pursuit of wealth and status rather than purpose or passion. At around 32 years of age, Mander enlisted in the military, perhaps as a means of escaping the suffocating routine of his previous life. Yet even here he quickly became disillusioned. Mander's health was frail, and his experiences in the military only further deepened his sense of despair. He left the army shortly thereafter, continuing to struggle with the isolation and emptiness he felt in his day-to-day life. During this period, he turned to books for solace, particularly poetry and philosophy, seeking refuge in the words of thinkers who seemed to share his sense of alienation. It was during this time that Mander encountered the work of Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most influential philosophers of the 19th century, and the founder of philosophical pessimism. Schopenhauer's ideas, particularly his view of life as fundamentally negative, struck Mander with a force that would alter the course of his life. Schopenhauer had proposed that the will, a blind, irrational, and ceaseless force, was the driving force behind all life. This will manifested as an unending cycle of desire and dissatisfaction, where the satisfaction of one desire only led to the emergence of another, creating a never-ending treadmill of suffering. For Mander, Schopenhauer's worldview provided a sense of validation. His own suffering, which he had struggled to articulate, was reflected in Schopenhauer's philosophy. The idea that life was not a process of fulfillment but rather one of perpetual striving, where satisfaction was fleeting and suffering was inevitable, resonated deeply with him. This view of existence, where pain eclipses pleasure and life is dominated by ceaseless want, became the cornerstone of Mander's intellectual project. In 1876, at the age of 34, Mander published his most significant work, The Philosophy of Redemption. In this dense and complex text, Mander outlined his unique interpretation of Schopenhauer's pessimism and developed a metaphysical system that explored the nature of existence, suffering, and the ultimate aim of the universe. His work, though highly obscure, presented a radical vision of the world, one that rejected the possibility of ultimate fulfillment or meaning, and instead embraced the idea of non-being and dissolution. The central concept of Mander's philosophy is the duality between individuality and movement. The world, according to Mander, is both fragmented into individual parts and unified as a whole. This paradox, where everything is simultaneously connected and isolated, forms the basis of Mander's view of existence. He argued that life is a dynamic interplay between these two forces, individuality, or the ego, and movement, which he described as a metaphysical force that compels action and change. For Mander, the will to live, which Schopenhauer had described as the fundamental force behind existence, was not a force for creation or survival but a force of decay and destruction. The will, in Mander's interpretation, is not a force that drives us toward fulfillment or happiness, but one that propels us toward fragmentation, disintegration, and ultimately death. According to Mander, the universe itself was not a product of creation or design but the result of a process of disintegration. He viewed the universe as a dying entity, moving inexorably toward its final dissolution. Mander's metaphysical conception of the universe drew upon religious and spiritual language, despite his self-identification as an atheist. He argued that the universe had originally existed as a unified whole, which he referred to as God. However, this unity was not stable and at some point God or the original unity ceased to exist. In Mander's view, God's death marked the beginning of the universe as we know it, a universe defined by fragmentation and suffering. The universe, then, is not progressing toward some greater purpose or meaning but is instead on a trajectory toward its own destruction and annihilation. The ultimate goal of this cosmic process, according to Mander, is redemption through dissolution. He saw suffering as an inescapable part of existence, but he also believed that suffering could be alleviated through the cessation of existence itself. Death, for Mander, was not something to be feared but rather the ultimate form of redemption, the end of the cycle of suffering. He argued that the universe's true aim was not to sustain life but to eliminate it entirely. The universe, in Mander's view, was a decaying corpse on its way to its final dissolution into nothingness. Mander's life, as well as his work, provides a tragic and poignant reflection on the dangers of intellectual despair. Just as his philosophy reached its bleakest conclusion, so too did his life. In 1876, shortly after the publication of The Philosophy of Redemption, Mander took his own life. His suicide, coming at such a young age and after completing his intellectual magnum opus, suggests that his philosophical beliefs were not merely abstract ideas but reflections of deep existential anguish. Mander's tragic end raises difficult questions about the relationship between philosophy and mental health. While many philosophers such as Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Camus lived into old age despite their pessimistic views, Mander's life ended much too soon. His death is a stark reminder that intellectual exploration, particularly when it delves into the darker realms of existence, can have profound emotional and psychological consequences. His decision to end his life can be seen as a culmination of his philosophical beliefs, the ultimate rejection of existence and the desire for redemption through annihilation. Some scholars argue that Mander's mental health played a significant role in his decision to end his life. His family history was marked by tragedy. His grandfather and older brother had both taken their lives at a young age, and it is possible that Mander inherited a predisposition to depression or despair. His philosophy, which seemed to find solace in the idea of non-being, may have been a response to his own inner turmoil, rather than the cause of it. In this sense, Mander's intellectual pessimism may have been a coping mechanism, a way to make sense of the suffering he felt in his own life. Despite the dark and nihilistic nature of Mander's philosophy, there is a deep paradox at the heart of his thought. On one hand, Mander was unequivocally a pessimist, arguing that life is inherently suffering and that non-being is preferable to existence. On the other hand, his philosophy was not entirely devoid of meaning. For Mander, the ultimate goal of the universe was to reach non-being, to end suffering through annihilation. This goal of redemption, though bleak, imbued his pessimism with a sense of purpose and direction. Mander's paradoxical worldview is even more striking when we consider his personal life. Despite his belief in the futility of existence, he was deeply concerned with social justice and the well-being of others. He advocated for progressive political causes, particularly those related to the alleviation of poverty and suffering. His political activism suggests that, Even in the face of overwhelming despair, Mander retained a sense of empathy and compassion for others. This paradox, embracing both the futility of existence and the desire to reduce suffering in the world. Thank you for accompanying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below so we can discuss. Wish you and your family good health.